This week at Microsoft's E3 Showcase event, I had a special opportunity to sit down with Forza Horizon 4, managing to nab some beautiful 4K capture in the process, which is presented here for your racing pleasure. The Horizon games have always been gorgeous, and after the third game's bright Australian setting, I think we were all curious to see where it would go next. The answer, of course, is England, a perfect fit for the English studio Playground Games. The resulting presentation is certainly worth sitting up for. Forza Horizon 4 then is a natural evolution of 3, but with a slew of new visual and gameplay features on tap. It's also the first in the series to have been created with Xbox One X in mind from the very start. This is most evident in the announced frame rate options. During Microsoft's media briefing this past Sunday, it was announced that the Xbox One X version of the game will feature a proper 60 frames per second option, which is something we had hoped for when Horizon 3 was patched for Xbox One X, but now the dream appears to be a reality. Of course, it'll likely manifest as a lower resolution high performance mode, while the typical 30 FPS option will go for native 4K instead. I say likely as this option was not selectable in the demo I played on the show floor. It was locked down to 30 FPS just like prior games. It'll certainly be interesting to see how this impacts the presentation, as it's not entirely clear what concessions will have to be made to hit the target 60 frames per second. But it could certainly prove to be a game changer for many players. After all, it's a series that has always targeted 30 FPS on consoles. Doubling that can only benefit the experience, resulting in an even more responsive game. That said, even at 30 FPS, Horizon as a series has always managed to look and feel great in motion, and surprisingly the fourth game manages to feel decidedly more responsive than previous entries. Perhaps input latency has been reduced, or maybe the handling has simply been tweaked. It's not entirely clear yet, but the game definitely felt more responsive than I'm used to. It'll be interesting to directly compare with previous entries in the series to determine just how much it's evolved, but at the very least my first impressions suggest tighter handling all around. As you no doubt have noticed by this point then, the footage in this video is native 4K, much like the X patch created for the previous game. Image quality is simply pristine here. I didn't get the chance to see the game running with HDR unfortunately, but it will definitely be supported in the final game. Beyond the basics then, perhaps the most important new visual and gameplay feature added to the mix are the seasons. This is something that I discussed in the behind the scenes video covering Onrush, which features a similar system, and it's great to see it here in Horizon as well since you'll be spending a lot of time out in this giant open world. But how do you show this in a demo? Well, simple. Jump between seasons at fixed points during the race. Basically think of it like this. If you're familiar with Forza Horizon 3, this allowed you to sample several different cars and types of terrain during the introduction, with seamless transitions between each of them. Horizon 4 continues this approach, but this time, the season changes along with the vehicle. It's a great way to introduce players to this new feature. Take this sequence. The transition between the gorgeous autumn scenery to an icy cold winter is surprisingly seamless, suggesting that the game is designed to be highly dynamic in nature. While it's true that the camera cuts could allow for some potential trickery, there is no visible loading at all interrupting the gameplay. It's quite impressive and is the thing that left the greatest impression on me. So let's break down those seasons then. Well, the demo begins during the fall with crimson trees and a low-hanging sun shining across the world. Long shadows are cast while specular highlights across the road surface help increase the sense of depth and lighting. This is then combined with top-notch motion blur and improved materials, resulting in a more striking presentation, which is then further enhanced by a killer music choice that perfectly fits the style on display here. When the game jumps over to winter, however, tire tracks are introduced as vehicles realistically carve up the snow during the race. This looks great, but honestly it's the indirect lighting that is most striking in this sequence. The mix of realistic snow rendering, beautifully lit particles, and great reflection work combined to deliver something truly spectacular. Following winter then, we're given a look at springtime in a scene reminiscent of Horizon 3. A dense forest with detailed foliage, great puddles and mud, along with nice rain particles can be seen all around you. And if we switch to the cockpit view, the wipers interact with the water droplets similar to previous entries. It still looks pretty good. I also appreciate the bikers that appear alongside your car, each spraying different colored smoke trails. It's a nice touch, especially with a singular cinematic moment. Lastly, there's the summertime, which is obviously bright and sunny. This should be a great showpiece for HDR. All seasons look excellent, however, and it'll be interesting to see how this ties into the progression system. It's unlikely that seasons will change as rapidly as this introduction sequence, but it's great to know that the engine is capable of it. The season system is also interesting to consider when thinking about Playground's other project. As mentioned at the show, Microsoft now owns Playground Games. With its pristine track record, it's a smart purchase. It was also announced that they are working on a new open-world adventure game, which has long been rumored as Fable. The question here is, will Forza Tech be adapted to include additional features relevant to a presumably third-person action RPG, or will they simply work with different technology entirely? Either way, the experience gained in building such a large, varied world will no doubt pay off in making this type of game. The reliance on full night and day transitions, seasonal transitions, and dynamic weather suggests that they are ready to tackle a sprawling role-playing game. In the here and now, though, it's great to see the engine evolve. Both Turn 10 and Playground Games are clearly working together, but it's not difficult to imagine a little bit of rivalry between them. Forza 7 is a gorgeous looking game, but it's focused on recreating actual tracks, which aren't necessarily the most visually striking. With Horizon 4, however, it's just flat out gorgeous all of the time. The art direction and use of colors really pop. And how about performance? Well, in the case of this demo, it really is just a flat line. It's a rock solid 30 frames per second throughout the entire demo, just as you would expect. Now again, for the demo, the game was played on Xbox One X, but based on Playground's track record, we would expect similar metrics as Forza Horizon 3 on the base Xbox One. That means it'll likely deliver a Full HD 1080p with the same great anti-aliasing and locked 30 FPS performance. The 60 FPS mode won't be an option here, but it should still look pretty great. It's also coming to Windows 10 specifically, just like Horizon 3. The big hope here, however, is that the optimization work done to achieve 60 FPS on Xbox One X will translate into faster PC performance. After all, the third game really put a strain on powerful PCs back at launch when aiming for higher frame rates, so we'd like to see some improvements there. Forza Horizon 4 then is a really interesting project. It may be yet another entry, but as always, it manages to feel remarkably fresh. When I picked up the controller, slipped on the headphones, and started racing, the crowded world around me just disappeared. It's that perfect mix of music, visuals, and control. Playground Games certainly knows what it's doing.
Horizon is here to stay.
But really, this is just scratching the surface. First impressions based on a limited time with a demo. You should know what to expect at this point from a Horizon game, but it doesn't mean it won't still impress. What I'm most interested in seeing at this point are towns. We saw a little bit of it in the trailers, but I wonder, will we see a proper city environment? Might it be possible to race around town in a style similar to Project Gotham Racing? It's all up in the air still, but we should find out soon enough. When the game releases then, we'll take a deeper look at the technology powering the game and put the high frame rate mode to the test. For now though, hopefully you enjoyed this quick look at Playground's latest work. If you want to see the game at its best then, be sure to check out digitalfoundry.net and consider supporting us on Patreon. If you enjoyed this video though, be sure to give us a like, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification button, and perhaps even follow us over on Twitter. But until next time, this is John signing off.